Welcome to the Coffee House, where in the next hour, is this man giving the poultry industry free range to pollute? And why does the Chesapeake Bay Foundation's Theresa Pierno care? We chat with five-time Grammy nominee Steve Earle, witness to executions, and visit 3 area house concerts. Many music lovers and musicians prefer an at-home performance. Plus a Martin Lueders photo essay on landmines in Afghanistan. Trans fats, they could be in your snacks and clogging up your heart. We've got a Brandon Johnson poem, Come On In, a blues hop, the sights and sounds of the recent DC Caribbean Carnival, and an animated send-up of vending machines. Hi, and welcome to the Forum at the Coffee House. Agriculture is Maryland's largest industry, and chickens are king on the farm throughout the Delmarva Peninsula. But the poultry industry is restructuring. The nation's largest producer, Tyson's, is closing its processing plant in Maryland and concentrating production in Virginia, which means less chicken scratch for Maryland farmers, but probably no less chicken fee running off and polluting the Chesapeake Bay. Chicken waste is the largest source of nitrogen and phosphorus on the eastern shore. It overstimulates algae growth. The algae then suck up oxygen in the water, suffocating fish and other water life. Former Maryland Governor Paris Clendening tried to protect the bay by making the big poultry processors liable for pollution by farmers who raise chickens for the likes of Purdue and Tyson's. But his successor, Bob Ehrlich, has scrapped that rule. We wanted to know why, but the governor declined to send someone to explain his decision. We are joined by Theresa Pierno, Vice President for Resource Protection at the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Welcome, Theresa, to the Coffee House.
Well, thank you for having me here.
My pleasure. It used to be kind of a twofer for farmers to raise chickens because they would get the chickens to raise for the poultry industry, and the manure then would be fertilizer for crops they were growing. What happened?
Right. Actually, it was valuable. It was something that they could, they didn't have to pay and purchase additional fertilizer. And what we're finding now is because of the excess, the nitrogen and the phosphorus that is in the manure, and the excess pollution that means is flowing into the bay when you have rainfall and you have events like we've had recently, it creates a major problem with algae growth and pollution for the Chesapeake Bay and the tributaries. So the last few years, under the Water Quality Improvement Act, there's been an effort to really try to reduce the amount of fertilizer that the farmers can put on their farm fields. And with those reductions, then, we have a lot of excess manure. And the question is, who's responsible for finding other uses for that manure? What do we do with all of it if we're not going to be laying it on the farm fields?
Tell me a little bit about the effect on the bay of the nitrogen and phosphorus. What negative impact does it have?
Well, fertilizer sounds like a good thing, and most people think it enriches the soil and it helps crops grow, and certainly that's true. But when you have additional nitrogen, phosphorus that the crops really can't take in, all that excess flows into the waterways. And what happens is you have algae growth, and ultimately those algae blooms create a problem with low oxygen. And you basically have the fish suffocating and the wildlife. So many times you'll see major fish kills where you have big algae blooms occur. But also long term it creates problems for bay grasses, which are very important for habitat for many other, including our crabs. And we've seen, of course, a decline in bay grasses, which also help to filter and buffer some of that nitrogen and sediment that's flowing into the bay. So it starts to really create an imbalanced system, and you start to see decline, as we're seeing today.
The former governor wanted to hold the big processors liable for the manure that would run off into the bay. But the chickens weren't actually raised by the processors. They were raised by independent contractors. The new governor has said, well, why hold the big processors liable? They're not the ones raising the chickens. Isn't that right?
Well, actually not. When you look at the way the system, and it's really a closed system, when you look at whether it's Purdue or Tyson or Allen, they actually provide the chicken feed. They provide the chickens, and in many times they're financing the houses. In some cases they actually own the chicken houses. So we feel as though it's very clear that they are taking on, of course, tremendous responsibility when they're providing all of this kind of detail to the grower. And therefore, they should also take on some responsibility for the end product and not leave really, particularly the small farmers, are left out there to have to deal with this major problem alone.
Now, you sound as though you're championing the interests of the small farmer in this situation, but on the Eastern Shore, probably many small farmers are saying this liability for polluting the bay, we can't survive this.
Well, I think there's a couple issues here. I mean, the small farmer, first of all, hopes that eventually there will be uses for the manure, like whether it's burning it for energy use or pelletizing, which Purdue has already built a pelletizing plant in Delaware. So they don't want to lose the ownership of that manure if ultimately it does again become something that is valuable. And we understand that. And actually, the permit process that now has been turned around by current Governor Ehrlich allowed for the ownership to remain with the farmer, so they didn't lose that value. But it said that if there's a problem in finding technical support or finding a place to take this manure, that the industry then would take responsibility and make sure that they didn't leave the farmer out there alone. So it did protect the farmer. The problem is the farmer's really caught in the middle. If they support something like what's been dubbed co-permitting, and the company, the Purdue's and the Tysons, are so opposed to it, they really jeopardize their own welfare, because these contracts can be renewed or they can be just thrown out every year, basically. And in fact, every time they get a new litter, the chickens can be withheld if the industry decides to do that. So it's a very difficult process for the growers.
And often we're talking about what might be described as designer chickens, aren't we? That,
right.
And they're ordered by Purdue or Tysons to be grown in a particular way to create a particular end product that Tysons and Purdue is ordering to put in the marketplace.
Absolutely.
There is something called a bi-state blue crab commission
right.
that had existed and probably by the time this program airs will no longer exist. Tell me about that.
That's right. Unfortunately, this commission brought together officials from Virginia and Maryland to work on the whole problem with the reduction that we're seeing in the blue crab. And of course, a lot of that, again, is related to nitrogen pollution and the problems that we're seeing with the Chesapeake Bay related to sewage and agriculture.
Now tell me why we care about the blue crab.
Well, I mean, obviously it's a very important staple for our fisheries and for the public. I think the Marylanders and Virginians love the blue crab, but it's also an important element of the whole food chain.
This is what we're eating?
You know, absolutely.
Okay.
And there's a tremendous economic value, and certainly that economic value has been placed at, you know, potentially $1 trillion for the entire watershed of a clean bay, and the crab feeds into that whole fisheries aspect of it. So it's very important from that angle. But I think what more importantly that we have to look at is it's a sign. When you start to lose very important species like the blue crab, and clearly it's an indication of the pollution problem, we need to take action. And that's exactly what the Bi-State Blue Crab Commission did. It put in place a 15% reduction of harvest so that we had to make sure that we basically took fewer crabs out so that it could really double that kind of spawning stock, so we'd be able to see the blue crabs increase in numbers. And that's a very difficult thing to do, to get Maryland and Virginia to work together. And now our fear is, with this commission no longer being in place, that we're going to have trouble in the future and continuing to have that kind of cooperation. And we may very
point
well...
a finger. Why doesn't it continue to exist?
Well, some of it is funding. I mean, clearly it costs money. Each of the states have put up a couple $100,000 for all the scientific research, because you need to continue to study this issue. You need to make sure you know what's working, what's not working, if we need to have maybe a 20% reduction in catch, or we need to do something different. And I think without that kind of commission there to do the scientific and technical information that then the decision makers and the policy makers need to have in place for them to determine what to do and what action to take.
Might some of the work of the Bi-State Commission be taken up in the forthcoming Agriculture Summit on nutrients?
Well, I mean, clearly we're going to see each of the states continuing to look at the crab issue, and in Maryland they've created their own task force that's going to be looking at this issue, and that's very important. But the crabs don't know about the boundaries, and the reality is the Chesapeake Bay flows through Maryland and Virginia, And it's very important that that cooperative and that working together continues. And I'm hopeful that the Commission will be reconstituted at some time very soon, and that each of the states will find the resources and the political will and the commitment to move forward, because it is very important.
And what soundings are you getting out of the Ehrlich and Warner administrations on that?
Well, unfortunately, Maryland has been taking the position, and Virginia, that they're going to continue, obviously, to commit to the 15% reduction in catch, but that they just don't have the resources at this time for the Bi-State Blue Crab Commission. We hope that they look at that again and change. The Agricultural Summit that's coming up in August is going to be, I think, important for looking at the whole nutrient management process in Maryland. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that, really plays into the legislative session and what kinds of changes we might see in recommendations for nutrient management in the state of Maryland, because I think it's going to be critical that we stay tough and that we require these plans to be implemented as quickly as possible if we're going to reduce the kind of runoff we're seeing.
To what extent is the issue that we're now addressing, the runoff, the manure, the chicken feed, the critical issue facing the Bay? What are the other major dangers that the Bay currently faces?
Right. Well, basically sewage treatment plants. The nitrogen that comes from, obviously, the sewage treatment plants are the number one kind of what they call point source pollution problem. And the technology is there. We know what needs to be done to get down to what's dubbed 3 milligrams per liter, sort of the best technology. And that's, again, just taking political will and the kind of resources that I think the public is willing to commit. In fact, in Maryland, it's been estimated to cost between $5 and $15 a household annually in order to upgrade all of our major wastewater treatment plants in the watershed, which that would be just incredible. And then you look at agriculture, certainly another major player, all of that runoff. And then when you start to go beyond that, you look at air. Nitrogen comes from the air. We have about a third of the nitrogen coming from air deposition, the pollution from automobiles and power plants. And then beyond that, you have the urban runoff that comes from our storm drains and the streets and all of the kinds of things that people are doing that contribute to it, whether it's the additional fertilizers on the lawns.
How are we doing, though? Former Senator Mathias wrote an article recently in the Washington Post saying that in certain ways we're no better off than they were 20 years ago in terms of the Bay.
Well, in many ways that's true. What has happened is we have this enormous population that has moved into the watershed. So if you look at the growth that we've seen over the last 20 years, I mean, some would say we've done a great job of being able to at least maintain the level that we have. But the problem is in the last few years, now we're starting to see a decline. And we cannot afford to let that happen. We've worked so hard to get to this point, and certainly a lot has been done. But we know what needs to be done for the future. We can do it. We've got the technology in place to upgrade sewage treatment plants. We know what needs to be done in agriculture, and it's just going to take the political will and the commitment to spend those resources and make the Chesapeake Bay a priority.
Thanks. Many thanks to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation's Theresa Pierno for joining us in the coffee house, and best wishes on your ongoing Bay Watch. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
I'm Mark Cohen, and this has been Coffee House Forum.
I've been here 4 out of the last 5 years for a fast and vigil, which commemorates the two Supreme Court decisions that you know, the one that did away with the death penalty when the death penalty died of natural causes in this country, and the one that reinstated it happened to fall in the same week. So I guess this is the 10th year this year, and that abolitionists have been sort of gathering here. And it's kind of cool because it's people from nearly every organization in the business show up here this time of year, and I've been coming for 5 years now. In Texas, there were a lot of guys that wrote me. When guys on death row wrote me, I would write them back. And one guy, a guy named Jonathan Nobles, who was not innocent, he was guilty. All my guys are guilty for some reason. I don't know why that is, but so far no innocent people have written me. And of a heinous crime. But I knew John for like 11 years. Most of the time he was on death row, and you know, we corresponded, and then I suddenly got a call from him one day, this guy that I only knew from letters, and because once he got a date, you know, the rules change, and he was allowed to call and ask if I would witness his execution, and I didn't know how to say no. It was something I was completely and totally unprepared for, and so I did it. I very innocently agreed to do it. I mean, I did talk to some people. I was worried about it. I knew it was a serious decision, but I talked to the people I knew that had witnessed executions, Sister Helen. It did permanent damage to me. It did stuff to me I've still yet to recover from. And if I had it to do over again, I probably wouldn't do it. And since then, I don't get as personally involved with inmates. I decided that I can impose the death penalty without becoming quite so personally involved, simply because I've done it once and I can't take the hit. I saw a soul being ripped from a body. People really want to live, man. We're hard to kill, and it didn't look, you know, I saw, John, they prearrange a signal in Texas, and it's done, the warden will tell the inmate that if he wants to, he can give him a signal in advance that lets the warden know that he's ready. And the warden's signal is he takes his glasses off like that, and then the guy behind the glass knows to start the injection. In Texas, they don't use Fred Luechter's machine. They push drugs by hand through a regular T-fitting, just like you see in a hospital. And so there's a real live human being there putting all three, you can't see it, but they're putting all three drugs individually, you know, one at a time into a T-fitting. But what John had done, and I didn't know this because that conversation took place in private after the last time I saw John was 12:30 on the day that he was executed at 6 that evening, and before they transported him over to the Walls unit itself. But he had prearranged, he'd talked to his mother. We'd been trying to find his mother, who he hadn't talked to the entire time he'd been in prison. And John was raised in foster homes, and his mother told him that she liked the way that he sang Silent Night, that he used to sing so pretty when he was little, and she liked the way he sang Silent Night. So he gave his statement, which was a Bible passage that he had memorized, and he was really nervous about forgetting part of it. And the last line was the signal to the warden, and then he started singing Silent Night. And when he got to Mother and Child, I mean, on that line itself, all the breath was like forced. He couldn't sing anymore because all the breath just, I mean, it blew out of his body. It was like, and it made a really loud sound. It was like, huh, really audible. And we were hearing it through a microphone. We were on the other side of some glass, but then his head pitched forward violently enough that his glasses fell off and hit his chest and landed on the floor. And then he didn't move anymore. And then he just turned blue and he died. And 5 minutes later, because that's what the protocol prescribes, the doctor came in. The doctor's not in the room when it happens. And the warden is and the chaplain is. The only two people in the room. And checked him for vital signs, and they pronounced him dead.
I'm 29 years old. I was born in Oklahoma, quarter Cherokee, I'm told.
You know, Billy Austin was the first thing that I wrote. I wrote it in 1990 when my idea of activism was to show up at a rally in a limo and get out and sing a song and get back in the limo and go and probably shoot some dope between there and the hotel. But, you know, Billy Austin is about, you know, an inmate who's really basically making a political statement. And people like that song, but I'm much prouder of Ellis Unit 1 because Ellis Unit 1 is about a guard, and it was inspired by one particular scene in Sister Helen's book where she's talking to a guard that she got to know who's having a crisis of conscience about his job. And they ask him, you know, she asked him what he does when the executions take place. He says, the left leg, I do the left leg. I strap down the left leg. And that's part of what happens. Human beings are not that willing to kill other human beings. And so they have to convince these people that they're killing a leg. You know, they have one part of the protocol that they do, and it makes the process less of, you know, a one-on-one, one person killing another person.
But then they transferred me to Ellis Unit 1.
And it's not, it's us killing a person. And that's where my objection to the death penalty comes from. I object to the damage it does to my spirit for me to kill people, and if my government kills people in a democracy, then I'm killing people. Period. It's really that simple for me.
Seen all the kids in the soda pop bands, but none of them look like me. So I started looking around for a light out of the dim. And the first thing I heard that made sense was the word of Muhammad, peace be upon him. I shall do, la ilaha illallah. There's no God but God if my daddy could see me now.
During the past 10 years or so, I've shot stories on the issue of landmines in perhaps 10 countries. And no place compares to Afghanistan in terms of feeling this ever-present threat and constant fear of treading even a meter or two off the pavement. I traveled to Afghanistan in late February of this year in order to work on a project documenting USAID-funded development and reconstruction programs throughout the country. Landmines and unexploded ordinances, otherwise known as UXOs, affect just about every facet of life there, particularly in the area of agriculture for obvious reasons. As everyone knows, Afghanistan has been ravaged by a series of nearly continuous wars for the past few decades. According to the Red Cross, roughly 200,000 people have been killed or maimed by landmines in Afghanistan. There's an expression that landmines are the best security guards that money can buy because they never sleep. One of the first things you notice in Kabul is the recurring image of men either begging in traffic or outside a mosque, or hobbling around on crutches, either completely missing a foot or an entire leg, or with an old, ill-fitting prosthetic device. Agriculture is key to Afghanistan's economy, and farmers make up a large percentage of the landmine victims. During the spring, as the mountain snows begin to melt, the torrent of what are known as water washes erode the soil and dislodge landmines and UXOs from the mountains and foothills, relocating them randomly along the streams and rivers in the plains and valleys throughout Afghanistan. There are probably, at the moment, at least a dozen either international or local non-governmental organizations working on demining the entire country. Estimates of how many mines there actually are in Afghanistan today range between 3 million up to 18 million. So really, in terms of land size, Afghanistan is comparable to the size of Texas. And if you're looking at the low end of estimates, 3 million mines is still a lot of landmines. I'd say there are at least a dozen international or local non-governmental organizations working to demine Afghanistan Recently, the number of landmine victims has dropped from 300 people per month to approximately 120 people per month. While the landmine issue is predominantly a legacy of the Soviet era in Afghanistan, I've come across mines produced in China, France, other European countries, and have heard that there are mines in Afghanistan that were produced here in the United States. Unexploded ordinances, or UXOs as they're known, are perhaps an even bigger problem than landmines. Unassuming children are attracted to the bright yellow color of cluster bombs, which the U.S. military dropped generously during the airstrikes against the Taliban. Several demining organizations use dogs, usually German shepherds, to sniff out landmines. It's not cheap. Each dog costs up to $30,000 US to train. Afghanistan will probably never be entirely free of landmines, and about the only thing upon which demining engineers agree is that it'll take at least 3 generations of continuous work before Afghanistan is normalized.
Hi, and welcome to In Sickness and in Health at the Coffee House. We know that cookies, French fries, cakes, and ice cream aren't the greatest for our health. But apparently they're worse than we thought if they contain, and most do, trans fats. What are these, and why do some scientists say they're so bad for our hearts? And how do you know if trans fats are in your food? Let's ask Sally Fallon, founder of the nonprofit Weston A Foundation, and co-author of a book about fats in our diet, and Alison Kretser, Director of Scientific and Nutrition Policy at the Grocery Manufacturers of America. Welcome, Sally and Alison, to the Coffee House.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to be here.
What are trans fats? Perhaps you'd like to start out, Sally.
They are vegetable. They are a liquid oil that has been transformed into something solid through a process called partial hydrogenation, which actually rearranges the fat molecule and creates something that's not found in nature. And when you consume these fats, they become built into your cells, your cell membranes, and that's where they cause all the problems, because certain chemical reactions your body wants to make cannot happen when they're there.
How would we know on labels what they are? How could we identify them?
Well, it's very soon we'll have that information on the label. It's imminent that FDA will be coming out with new regulations that will require trans fat labeling. So it will you'll be able to pick up a label, turn it over at the package, and see in the nutrition facts box directly under saturated fat will be a separate line item for trans fat. You'll also have the quantitative amount, so 2 grams of trans fat on the label.
So when will this actually be implemented? When will we see these labels change?
Well, we expect the final rule to be issued this month, so almost any time, and then food manufacturers will have a period of time in which they will be able to transition over their label, and we expect that manufacturers will quickly get that information onto labels. Typically 2006, January 2006, but consumers can expect that information far sooner.
Okay, and how do we know
But
in the
meanwhile, if a product contains partially hydrogenated oil, if you see those 2 words, partially hydrogenated, that's the sign that the trans fats are there.
So and partially hydrogenated soy oil,
or canola, or cottonseed.
What about hydrogenated? What does that mean?
Well, when
that's the same thing.
Yes, when they hydrogenate the oils, fully hydrogenate them, they actually become saturated. It's quite technical, but the process used today is partial hydrogenation.
Right. Fully hydrogenated oils are not used frequently. And the amount of trans fat has always been reflected in the total fat content of the product. So the amount has been there, but now we're going to have separate information because it's important for consumers to have that, to be able to make a good selection on what types of products to select.
So if something says 4 grams of fat and saturated fat 2 is 2 grams trans fats, or
not necessarily. It could be monounsaturated fats. It could be polyunsaturated fat. And so now we'll, as I say, we'll have a separate line item so that we'll know clearly.
This product has been around, trans fats, since 1910, I believe it was first used. Why all of a sudden is it meant to be bad for us?
Well, it's gradually become more and more used in processed foods. What we had in 1910 was just a very small amount, and now it's a very large amount in the diet. And concurrent with this great increase in the trans fats has been new studies showing that they really are a problem. And not just for heart disease. They interfere with enzymes that your body uses to protect you against cancer. They interfere with the insulin receptors in your cells and are one of the major causes of type 2 diabetes. They interfere with growth, learning ability. It's really something that we need to get out of the food supply. What we need to do is go back to what they used before. And that was the traditional fats, the tropical oils, and the butter and tallow and lard and everything that people used before.
Even today, the average intake of trans fat represents about 2.5 to 3% of the total caloric intake in the American diet. So saturated fat still represents almost 5 times the amount of trans fat in diets. So one thing we don't want to lose sight of also the amount of saturated fat in the diet, so that consumers, as they work to looking to lower their total fat intake, can feel reassured that their trans fat intake has been lowered as well as their saturated fat.
Right.
Yeah, see, and that's where we probably would disagree, because this anti-saturated fat message is really inaccurate. There's nothing wrong with the saturates. We had lots more saturates in our diet in 1900 than we do today. And as the saturated fat content of the diet has decreased, all of these diseases have increased. Saturates are very stable. You can heat them, you can cook with them. And you know, someone eating a lot of processed foods, there's not a lot of saturates in the processed foods. There's a lot of trans. So it just depends on what kind of diet you have. If you're eating a lot of processed foods, like a teenage boy eating a lot of chips and donuts and things like that, the amount of trans could be actually much, much higher. And this is a critical period of development when you shouldn't be getting any trans.
Alison, can you talk to the medical influence on our body from trans fats? It's called the worst fat when we do take too much of it, certainly. What does it do to cholesterol levels? What have the studies shown?
We know that it increases LDL, low density lipoprotein.
The bad cholesterol, yeah.
Cholesterol, and at the same time some studies indicate that it may lower the high density lipoprotein, HDL, which are the good kind of cholesterol in your blood. So we want to be careful and keep our intake of trans fat, help to reduce those levels, and that's good advice for consumers.
Should we be eating any of it, really? I mean, if it's
well, I feel very comfortable myself, because you know, we certainly continue, the grocery manufacturers of America continue to advise Americans to consume a diet, you know, with whole grains, fruits and vegetables, low-fat dairy, meats, and so forth, and so that there is room for some foods, more fun foods that we can enjoy, such as chips and cookies and crackers.
Why is it in there in the first place?
It's much less expensive. It's much less expensive than the tropical oils and the animal fats. It's something that's made right here in America. And
who makes it?
Well, it's made from 80% is made from soybean oil. So
different manufacturers?
I assume so. That's a question I can't
Well, one
answer.
of the things I'd like to respond to, Cathy, to what was just stated, was that the food industry in the mid-'80s responded to health authorities that had suggested that tropical oils, we began to see they are the more saturated oils, had adverse effect on blood cholesterol. And so we were asked, the food industry was asked to remove that, and so we removed tropical oils and replaced it with the trans fat. And so now, as science has emerged and advanced and so forth, we
goalpost
recognize, yes, yeah. So we will respond
Yeah,
to what is best for consumers, the health of consumers.
You know,
so it's cheaper.
the tropical oils have really gotten a bad rap. The areas where they use coconut oil and palm oil have much lower rates of heart disease than here.
So
And just because something raises cholesterol or lowers cholesterol a little bit in a feeding experiment does not mean that that product causes heart disease. In fact, the tropical oils have wonderful effects for the body. They're very protective. They enhance the immune system. They protect us against pathogens in the gut. And it's important to get these oils back into the food supply.
can I just get back onto other reasons that it's used? It's cheaper. What does it actually do to the food products once they're manufactured, as far as shelf life goes?
Well, it enhances as far as it provides a certain texture, that a mouthfeel that individuals, consumers like within a cracker or a chip product.
It makes
and so
things
forth.
crispy.
Crispier, and then the trans fat also, the partially hydrogenated oils help to prevent the oil rancidity of the oil
So
occurring.
they can be
Yes.
longer on the shelf, literally. If somebody wanted to, if they had a very high cholesterol level and wanted to stop trans fats right away and other fats, is it reversible? Do you get rid of the trans fats already in your body?
The body will clear them, but they actually takes longer for your body to get rid of the trans than the other fats.
Okay. A Harvard study said as many as 100,000 people die in this country annually because of trans fats. Is there a study that shows exactly how harmful this is?
I don't know how he got that figure.
No, I've not heard that figure, that
But-
high. And I think that we need to be careful, especially for your viewers, as far as not losing sight of looking at all various different nutrients and making decisions on which products to select.
One of the ironic things is that if your diet is high in saturated fats, you are more protected from the trans. And someone like myself who eats a lot of butter and cream and meat and so forth, it wouldn't hurt to have the trans because the saturates will go into the cells preferentially.
Okay. Just finally, Alison, quickly, this labeling that we'll see trans fats listed soon isn't the end of it, is it? Manufacturer can still say extra lean on the packet even though it contains trans fats, or low fat even though it contains trans fats. It's not the final ruling yet.
Well, low in saturated fat, that nutrient content claimed is linked to the amount of trans fat. So you may not say that unless there's less than 0.5 grams of trans fat.
Okay.
So that
Oh,
there
that's
are,
interesting.
yes, that the definition is part for that nutrient content claim. But
Ladies, we've run out of
No,
time
yeah.
already. I'm sorry about that.
thank you.
A very big thank you to Sally Fallon of the Weston A. Price Foundation and Alison Kretser of the Grocery Manufacturers of America for joining me in the coffee house. Eat well and see you next time. I'm Cathy Kristiansen, and this has been In Sickness and in Health.
I was going down to the crossroads because I needed help with that woman. 10 feet from the corner, she's standing there, hands on her hips, foot tapping a terrible rhythm, waiting for my ass. She say, Hobbs can't do nothing for me, her thighs ain't already done. You better come in to my kitchen, 'cause it's gonna be raining outdoors. Got my hands in my pockets searching for an excuse, but all I got is dust, desperation, and dirty hands. So I turn around and follow after my sweetie, knowing I needs to get clear of this woman before I'm through. But she turned to see if I was coming, and I see a shine in her eye like a blood-red diamond, a devilish look as I ever see. But the hips was Retha's, legs same fine line. She sure was looking powerful good, and I ain't even had no wine. Now, I needs to get me a mojo hand, show that woman how to treat a man. You better come in to my kitchen, 'cause it's gonna be raining outdoors. Now, I try to turn again and make it out the back way, but every time I get notion to cut tail and run, she tripped me faster than my feet can rise. She say, boy, it took me too long to get you, too long to train you, and you're too strong for me to let you go. So bring your sweet stuff on here. We got a talk we needs to have. I got some dips want you to see, some hips you can have for free. She looked to the sky, see some clouds passing by. Say she looked to the sky, see some clouds passing by. You better come in to my kitchen, 'cause it's gonna be raining outdoors. Now, I'm a man, don't know all his talents, but she got everything she wanted 5 times that night and 4 more times when the sun come too. Now, why a woman take advantage of a sorry man's needs? Why she gotta need him till the juice runs to his knees? Now, a friend tried to tell me female manipulation is the highest form of love. I say female manipulation is the highest form of love. You better come in to my kitchen, 'cause it's gonna be raining outdoors.
It's just a tiny little piece of me I took with you. My Miles Davis kind of blue. You sold it on
Well, tonight we're having a house concert featuring Beth Wood, an Austin, Texas artist.
I play bars and coffee shops. I play college shows, which can be really good and really sometimes not so good because you don't know how many people are going to show up, if at all. And so I guess compared to other shows, these are the most fun. I mean, a bar gig you can really sort of let loose and just have fun and play some old cover songs that you don't care about. But so yeah, this is more intense and more focused.
It's the most wonderful way to hear music, up close and personal, where not only everyone has a front row seat, it's totally natural and acoustic, but you're basically, when you walk in the door, you're backstage with the artist as well. And the people who come to these concerts are just the most wonderful bunch of people. And there's a lot of new friends to be made, and actually we've had a lot of house concerts sprout up because of ours from people who've come to see us, and it's a great network of musicians and friends.
Wow, this is so cool. Up close and personal. I'm trying not to spit on you guys, okay? Sorry if my feet stink. But we're all friends, right? Right, okay.
Our interest in house concerts began several years ago when we went to a house concert by Scott and Paula Moore out in Rockville. There were some wonderful folk singers there and a nice crowd of several dozen people, and we loved the music. So we thought, this is fun, let's think about having these house concerts ourselves.
I am a regular at the Wheel concert here. I think I've been to almost every one. I just think it's the greatest thing in the world. You get to come over here and hear really good music from some excellent entertainers, and it's a small audience. You can relax and enjoy it, and then at the intermission and afterwards you get to chat with them and kind of interrelate with them. It's very warm and personal.
It just amazes me, every house concert, how much talent there is out there. And I'm just amazed at all these talented singer-songwriters that are so nice and easygoing and fun and generous with their time to come to a house concert. It's just, it blows me away how much talent there is out there.
I just ain't satisfied.
Once we had laughed about a discount store and a diamond ring. Back when a flame was a friend, a comfort, a delicate dancing thing.
Well, the house concert thing has a certain sense of you trust the curator, you know, that people seem to go to. They trust the selection that the host made. So it's just a greater intimacy and immediacy.
The enjoyable thing about a house concert is that you don't have to. I think it's the only form where you go to a place having no idea who the artist is. You get people who just show up and literally say, so who's playing tonight? You know, people who just go regularly. And that's a very different kind of thing. You wouldn't go to a coffee house normally to hear someone you didn't know.
I'm doing it for a number of reasons. I think that independent musicians need a place to play in this Baltimore area. There's not a whole lot of venues for the independent singer-songwriter here. It's either real big or there's either really large venues or there's venues where it's just like a bar where no one comes to listen to the music. I'm filling a small void. I think I'm helping out musicians and helping out people who like this sort of music, contemporary singer-songwriters. And this is a place for them to come and listen to their music. And everyone sits and listens to the music, and everyone listens to the lyrics, and no one worries about the people talking over you while you're playing. And I think it's a good service. Okay, it's just a fun thing to do.
It's just, the informality's nice, and I really like jazz, and tonight's focused on jazz, so tonight's especially good.
Well, we don't have to travel too far from home to get here, and it's cost effective. And it's just kind of a nice way to wind down a busy day.
Yeah, I do get a lot of people come time and time again. I get people I always ask people when they come in how they heard about it. A lot of friends bring friends. I think I've only had a few come who have seen a flyer and decided to come, but I have had a few. But sometimes it's the artist that brings them in. Like the artist will have a mailing list and they'll send it out, and someone will learn from that about the show. So it mixes it up a lot, but I do have a lot of regulars.
Well, other than having a house that will fit probably 35 to 45 people or more, some have more, you need, of course, the time to do it. And when I say time, it means the time to dedicate to marketing the product that you're developing, that you are a house concert presenter, and networking with all the entertainers, meaning that you go out and hear a lot of music and plug in with a lot of festivals. And then when you get to the nuts and bolts of it, you really have to you develop a web page, you develop flyers, you distribute the flyers, you connect with radio stations, and you connect with newspapers. And it's worked well for us, and we've been getting good coverage from all of those areas. And then the word of mouth and the email list, and we have people sign up. Tonight we'll have a lot of people sign up for our email list, and we'll build on that.
I think you really have to have two people that really work hard on it. Fortunately, my husband and I, who've been married 24 years, we really complement each other in that he does the things that I don't like to do, and I do the things that he doesn't like to do, and that he does the marketing and calling people and RSVPs, whereas I like to play around with getting the different drinks and food and all that fun stuff. So it takes some effort, even though it looks, once it starts going, you forget it all, but it takes a little bit of effort, and you really need to complement each other and work together.
So I want to thank everybody for coming. There's a butler at the entrance to our door, and his sole job is to collect the donation for the artist tonight into this little box. And he doesn't do windows or anything. You know? He doesn't change oil, but he collects money. So by all means, now or later, at some point, make it by the butler. And the recommended artist donation tonight, 100% to the artist, is $12. That's only recommended. You can throw in 100, 200, 300. I'm sure it's okay. This is purely our donation of our time out of the pure love for the music, and that's all we want out of it, and we'll ever get out of it. Yes, we are out of pocket just because of the snacks and the chairs. Some people I've known have said we'll have a chair fund, but these chairs that we have, a lot of them are just, you'd be surprised how many chairs are around the house when you start collecting them. And then they have sales on these little fold-up chairs. So that costs a little, and the flyers we make and things like that, but it's not a lot.
It tends to be pretty good. I mean, it's not a situation where you have a guarantee that you're going to walk out, with a certain amount of money, but I can say that I've done several house concerts and I've never ever walked out and felt like I didn't have a good night financially. And I feel like even if there's just 10 people there, they're usually 10 really generous people, and they'll buy a CD or they'll put an extra $1 in the tip jar. So it's usually pretty good deal for a performer. And people tend to buy more CDs at house concerts too, I guess. Yeah.
For me, it's much less important of what the money is than what the audience is. That because you can get paid well, but if it's in a room where people aren't there for the music, it's just not worth it. I've been down that road,
I left the disco before midnight came, before my eyes got smoked up and my interest waned. I'd been fired up to party, but my body wouldn't play. I was recovering from the battles in my head that day. Threw out the window all desires and dreams. Then they rose
I don't take anything. The musician pretty much will decide what price they want to charge at the door, and it's usually very, very inexpensive, $5 to $7, and that's less expensive than most house concerts I found. A lot of house concerts are $12 or so, but I think I tell the musicians that if we go that high, I think we might hurt our crowd at this point because it's kind of a young venue, and the musician gets it all. And they get all their CD sales and everything, and that's about it. People bring a dish to pass, and that's how we sort of have food here. I don't have a lot of extra income as a teacher, but so we just kind of make it work here.
I'll find a way. to be a crime. So I dove into those stories as I never had before. And the sadness almost trapped me in the subway doors. A door opens my heart up to the